Stories from Maine is a collection of true tales and legendary stories of daring, heroism, absurdity, disaster, and spectacle, all proving why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. One of the most infamous events in Maine history took place in what would become the city of Portland during the initial days of America's War for Independence. When it was over, a British naval officer had been publicly disgraced, the full might of the British Navy had been unleashed, and a city was bombed to ruins. Stay with us and hear the true tale of Thompson's War, next, on this all-new episode of Stories from Maine. Our podcast begins right now.
This is our all-new Stories from Maine podcast for June 21, 2025. Stories from Maine is authored by historian Lori Suzanne Dell. Her books, Stories from Maine and Stories from Maine 2, as well as all of her books, are available through book retailers and can be found on Amazon. Stories from Maine is leaving Spotify. As of July 1, 2025, all of our podcast episodes will stream only on our YouTube channel. So, subscribe to our channel on YouTube at Stories from Maine for all of our future episodes and much more. You can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Stories from Maine. And you can email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
It is a true story, and one that lives on in Maine's incredible history, and it had a profound effect on what would become Maine's largest city. Now, let's head on over to Oscar for this week's true story of Thompson's War.
In the spring of 1775, a great rebellion of North American colonists, posed against the iron fist of the mighty British Crown, were positioning to fight against tyranny. Either liberty or death, as Patrick Henry demanded, would be the sworn outcome. The American Revolution was underway, and a band of local militia, more than 50 men strong, was hell-bent on getting in on the insurrection. At the Brunswick Tavern owned by Samuel Thompson, a plan was carefully made to disturb British shipping and the marine and merchant trade that was taking place in Portland Harbor, then known as Falmouth. Thompson was a commander in the militia, and his disdain for the British was feverish. Thompson was an enforcement officer authorized to inflict a boycott of British goods, all authorized by the Continental Congress, and his authority was as clear, as was his duty to stop all trade with Great Britain. He and his band of local militia gathered a flotilla of small boats on the New Meadows River and quietly set sail for Falmouth Harbor. When they arrived in early March, Thompson's militia quickly moved to enforce the boycott. A local shipmaker, loyal to the Crown, was attempting to accept a delivery of sail and rope to outfit a ship which would have been put to use against the colonial rebellion. Thompson and his men ordered the British ship to leave port without unloading. Yet, the British ship was in need of repairs before it could safely sail, and Thompson agreed to allow the repairs to be made. Within a week, a British warship, the HMS Canso, set sail from Boston and arrived in Falmouth Harbor to support the British effort, and they quickly came to loggerheads with Thompson's men. Outnumbered and outgunned, Thompson's men backed down and left the port as the canvas for making sails, and a mass of thick ship's rope was unloaded, and the Loyalist shipyard got back to work, building their British ship. But Thompson wasn't yet finished. Meanwhile, the spark of American independence was now aflame in Massachusetts, and news of the battles at Lexington and Concord had reached the province of Maine. As word of war with Britain spread, Thompson's plan grew. Now, Thompson intended to return to the harbor and capture the British warship, the HMS Canso, and her crew, and he would do so by first capturing her commander. When British Lieutenant Henry Mowat disembarked the HMS Canso on Tuesday morning, May 9th of 1775, he quickly found himself surrounded and taken prisoner by Samuel Thompson's men. The Canso's second officer, upon hearing of his commander's capture, announced that he would bombard the city if Mowat was not immediately released. To show his resolve, the second officer then fired 2 warning shots over the city from the Canso's cannon. This thundering of shot and shell, as it whistled overhead, announced the great threat and the ironclad steel will of the officers and crew of the British gunship. A call for militia support rang through the Falmouth communities, and hundreds of local colonial militia armed themselves, then ran for the wharf at Falmouth, where everything was quickly building toward an explosive conclusion, and local city leaders knew they had to act quickly to avert disaster. Difficult negotiations ensued. Name-calling rang out as demands were made by both sides, and hot tempers flared unabated. Finally, the decision to release Mowat was agreed upon by the city's leaders, despite Thompson's disapproval. As for Mowat, he was now seething with anger over his public humiliation, and he demanded that Colonel Samuel Thompson be arrested and handed over to the Canso's crew. But local leaders refused Mowat's demand. Meanwhile, hundreds of local militia awaited on the wharves of Casco Bay, and Mowat and his crew on the HMS Canso's knew they had to withdraw in seeming defeat and seek permission from British superiors back in Boston before taking this matter any further. Mowat quickly stepped back aboard his ship and ordered the Canso to raise sail and depart Falmouth Harbor. As the British warship slipped out of the harbor, hundreds of rebellious local militia cheered and thumped their chests with pride, believing the cause of liberty had just struck a blow against the forces of tyranny, and did so without ever firing a shot. While Mowat and his men left Falmouth in disgrace, local militia celebrated a seemingly huge victory. Yet, the truth was that this fracas was just the first round in this lopsided fight. The second round would bring a knockout blow, one which would leave the city of Falmouth in flames and smoky ruin. While the American Revolution was continuing all across the eastern coast of the North American continent, Henry Mowat's anger only grew. By October of 1775, Mowat returned to Falmouth, only this time he brought help. We'll be right back.
All new weekly episodes of our Stories from Maine podcasts stream each Saturday on our YouTube channel. Our original Stories from Maine weekly articles appear in the Maine newspaper, The Times Record, and can be found on newsstands and on their website each Friday. And, beginning on July 1st of 2025, our Stories from Maine podcast will no longer stream on Spotify. Instead, all of our Stories from Maine podcast episodes will stream only on our YouTube channel. So, please head on over to our Stories from Maine channel on YouTube and subscribe to keep enjoying our all-new weekly podcast episodes.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, let's go back to Oscar for the conclusion to this week's story of Thompson's War.
When the HMS Canso arrived in Casco Bay, Mowat had a fleet under his command with 5 ships and nearly 60 cannons at his disposal. Mowat issued a 2-hour warning for the entire city to evacuate, and then his fleet opened fire. For the next 8 hours, Mowat's guns repeatedly fired and landed incendiaries all through what is now the city of Portland, as more than 10,000 residents helplessly gathered near what is today known as Deering Oaks. As these residents and merchants watched on, the city of Falmouth was completely destroyed. Homes and businesses were leveled, buildings were left in heaps of ash. Thousands were left homeless. When the bombardment ended, Mowat and his fleet lifted anchor, set sail, and left the harbor and entered into Casco Bay, as Mowat's promised revenge was now complete. When Mowat left Casco Bay, he sailed his fleet eastward, up the coast of Maine, and on to harass other ports. As for Samuel Thompson, he went on to become a brigadier general in the Cumberland County Militia, and he served for many years as an elected member of the Massachusetts legislature, representing Cumberland County. He is said to have donated much land to Bowdoin College, and his legacy in Maine is well assured. And arguably, one of the lasting images of Thompson's war, one that is left to us via history, comes from a sprig of spruce that was worn in the hats of Thompson's militia as their badge of office during the expedition to Falmouth. And the image of a small spruce tree, one that had adorned the bow of the boats used to reach Falmouth from Brunswick, became the image of the naval ensign of Massachusetts and was the inspiration for Maine's future and original pine tree state flag. Today, the bombing of Falmouth is vividly recalled and described in Maine's history books, and Thompson's folly is forever remembered as the impetus of Mowat's revenge. As for the city of Falmouth, it would again be completely burned again in 1866, and is today the city of Portland, Maine. In the end, the most powerful military on earth, at the time, had been sorely defeated by a revolutionary movement, one that tossed a tyrannical government and saw the birth of a new and legendary nation. In the end, the birth of the United States of America was the final revenge, and Thompson's war remains as one of the best of our legendary Stories from Maine.
We hope you have enjoyed this week's feature story. All new weekly episodes of our Stories from Maine weekly podcast stream each Saturday on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, join us and more than 40,000 followers on our Facebook page, where we post new Maine history content daily. Thanks for listening.
Our weekly Stories from Maine article, published in the Brunswick, Maine newspaper, The Times Record, can be found on newsstands each Friday and can be viewed online. The Stories from Maine logos are a registered trademark of Lori Suzanne Dell, and all original content is copyright 2025, with all rights reserved. Please come back next Saturday for another all-new episode of Stories from Maine.